Hey, good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you out there. Welcome to this 25th edition of Ask Me Anything. And this is the 87th episode of ClariTea Chat. So, well, there are two reasons we have this ClariTea Chat. One is that when we have a backlog of questions, and of course, when I'm too busy to be seeking out and preparing for my interviews. But stay tuned. There are some good ones coming up, which I'm preparing for. But then, yeah, let's take this opportunity to have some stimulating and candid discussions here, and let's discuss challenges, opportunities, and current affairs, the SVB going down and stuff like that. Of course, there is some past backlog of questions that we already have. There's quite a bit of backlog about ChatGPT, and then given your questions, we are getting to have some fun with ChatGPT. So there's a very interesting question on entrepreneurship, or how to develop an entrepreneurial culture, and I'm going to share some experiences from driving this in a large organization, as well as building it in the startup that we are building, Flock and Go. Uh, and then we are going to have some fun about astrology with ChatGPT. Um, and then, of course, your questions. So it's all experiences, no gyan. But before I go ahead, I'm feeling a little alone here. So, guys, show your presence. Share your name and where you're joining from in the comments box to make your presence felt, not just to me, but to all the other fellows who are joining this chat out here. And then let's see who all have joined here. So I see Sumit welcoming everyone. It's become a habit for him. And then we have Sats here. Sats, thanks for joining. I know it's early morning there. I believe 6:30 or 7:30 in the morning in Texas. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Um, yeah. So yeah, please keep sending your questions, Sats. I know you ask a lot of questions, so do send in some. Of course, the latest news out there is SVB going down, and it's funny because about I think 4 or 5 months back. Oh wow, 5:33 a.m. in Texas. Hey, thanks, Ed. That makes me more indebted to you for joining so early. So, as Ed says, it's 5:33 a.m. in the morning in Texas, and that makes me feel, I would say, very good about someone waking up to listen to me. Hey, thanks, Ed. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I was talking about SVB, the Silicon Valley Bank. I think 4 or 5 months back, we were trying to open an account with them because they are a startup bank. And then I think they responded to us saying that we only open accounts for from funded startups. That means they want to receive the VC money in that. At that time, we were a little, uh, we were a little sad that we won't be able to open our account. But maybe today we can say that okay, things happen for good in retrospect. So maybe I mean, my that's just a personal aspect of it. But of course, it's bad for the industry. It's bad for the startups. I'm hearing that I was reading a Twitter feed which said that there are hundreds or maybe thousands of startups who have their accounts with SVB, and they will have difficulty facing, I mean, paying salaries and bills, um, because their money is locked up in the bank. I just hope that the banking regulator there, the guys who sort of forced it to close to prevent a run on the bank, um, they are able to salvage the situation, at least for the startups. But yeah, front and center, it's bad news for startup ecosystem. Well, I'm sure things happen, and then there are institutional mechanisms and institutions which are which would be like deep in discussions, and they'll be trying to see how best the whole thing can be salvaged. Given my gray hair, I have seen these crises, and how governments chip in, how the central banks chip in, and then, like then things turn for the better. Like for example, when we had the UTI fiasco about 20 years back, the whole thing was sort of restructured, and then the assets, and then sort of people took a stake in that. And then finally, when things turned around, I think anyone who helped salvage that situation actually made a lot of money, because they got the stock cheap, and then when things turned around, things turned for the better. Um, yeah. So on the same note, Sats is asking that. He's sharing that it's very scary. I heard that only 25% of accounts under 250K, which is that FDIC limit. So Sats, one of my philosophies of looking at these crises is that, is the shit hitting everyone? Okay, if the shit is hitting everyone, then I think the pain becomes big enough for the regulators to chip in, for the courts to chip in, for some big investors to come in. In this case, SVB was not able to, wasn't able to, sort of what do you call, revolve bond because of the run on the bank. Um, and I think that led to FDIC intervening. But I'm sure there are brains out there who will be looking at how to salvage the situation, and how not to let the entire startup ecosystem suffer. This in particular hits the startup ecosystem, because most startups actually bank with SVB. There are few startup focused banks, SVB being one of them. Um, but in the same Twitter feed, there were some good lessons as well, and which is that, don't put all your eggs in the same basket. I mean, don't bank with only one bank. Don't have just one customer. You know, don't have just one customer give you the entire revenue. So whenever, so entire philosophy is that, don't have a single point of failure, whether it's your bank, whether it's your customer, or whether it's, let's say, you're only technologist in your company, and that can land you in a soup. So I'm sure people who were banking with more banks than one, which is SVB, they would still be able to pay their salaries. So okay, so Sats asks a good question. Why should government bail out? It's going to be public tax money. Greed is being subsidized. I'm always amazed at the lack of checks and balances. PNB, SVB, 2008. Yeah, see, sets eventually what happens that yeah, there are some bad actors out there. The entire on the prima facie, I think it's the simplest thing to say that government should not bail out. Uh, but when you look at how these bailouts happen, they are not just that you take taxpayers' money and you hand it out to them, right? It will be so. Let's say whatever money comes in, it might come in as debt. It may be converted to equity, and when things get better, you may have a change in management. You may have better controls. You may have better, compliances being set up, more risk mitigations being set up, and then when it starts doing well, the stock will go up, and when the stock goes up, that is the time when the people who came to salvage the situation would sort of go home a little richer. So uh, it's not always that simple. It's always the question of a larger good as well. Can you let the entire startup ecosystem suffer? That's the other question. I mean, these startups didn't do anything wrong. So yeah, generally these are complex mechanisms that get set up. Yeah. So let me now go to our um, uh, let me go to our backlog of questions now. So a very very important question came from Senthil. Uh, he said, "How can we instill an entrepreneurial spirit in all members of our teams, and what measures can we use to ensure that everyone is contributing to our progress?" Okay. So, yeah, I mean, let me throw this question to our audience. If anyone has any views, if you have seen any of your bosses doing something, which where you felt that it's an entrepreneurial culture, are you doing something to promote an entrepreneurial culture? But let me start with. Please put your comments out there, and meanwhile, let me start with my experiences. So. The first thing is that I think in any department or company, the leader has to think like an entrepreneur. Okay. And so we cannot but cut the question that hey, we didn't have an entrepreneur. The point is that if you are asking this question to yourself and you are looking at driving an entrepreneurial culture, then the first thing is to hire people who are aspiring entrepreneurs. That means, so I will typically have a little bias, not too much, towards people who have tried starting a business or who have run a business for some time, because um, having an experience of entrepreneurship, whether it's let's say running a startup which failed, or running a business for some time and then exiting it and coming to a corporate role, that entrepreneurial tenure gives you a complete, 30,000 feet view to a on the ground view, and makes you really look out for every single thing that could be an opportunity, or every single thing that could be a risk. Okay. And being an entrepreneur myself, I can tell you that there's not too many things that I can just say that hey, I will delegate, or some other department will take care, like what we do in corporates, right? So we have to look for that entrepreneurial spirit in team members, and maybe any entrepreneurial tenure. Then second one is like make employees feel like partners. What that means is, um, most times the culture that runs in companies is like a command and control. You do what you're told. Many times people don't question, etc. But partner means you share information freely, and you communicate progress. When you ask for work to be done, you are clear about the whys. Here, if anyone wants to take some inspiration, you can actually try reading why. Start with why. This is a book by. Okay, can anyone just put in the comments who's the author here? Um, very popular guy. It's just the name is slipping my mind. But just search for Amazon for Start with Why, and you'll find the book. It's a very powerful book, which says that there are lots of stuff happening in the world, but then people who outshine, who make a difference, or who stand out are the people who are constantly uh, asking why, and that is giving them the answers which make them different from others, right? So and in a way, that's like, make them feel like partners. That means you must be answering all the questions. Of course, there are many other things, like, for example, give a incentive to the employees. You have to lead by example. You have to be entrepreneurial if you want to inspire your people to be entrepreneurs. But couple of things which are very important. So one of them is your tolerance to failure. Okay. um, so what happens when people fail? What happens when something fails? And this is a sort of introspection exercise that you can do, that whenever there was a failure, whenever, like, something didn't work out, whenever somebody made a blunder, what was your reaction? Did you fire them? Did you fire them in the sense that, did you scold them, or, like, did you go into a CYA mode? Did you hang somebody out there in front of the management? Did you put somebody under the bus? Because a lot of these behaviors on how you behave as a leader actually, and what you do when something doesn't work out, give a message to the people whether they can stick their necks out, whether they can take risks or not. So heart of entrepreneurship is your ability to take risks, and inherently risk taking will always have certain failures, and therefore how you handle and treat failures gives a very strong message to your people, whether whether it's okay to take risks or not, right? My personal philosophy is that when something gets messed up, okay, I think first thing is to make the person comfortable, and say, hey, you know what, shit happens all the time. This is not the first time I'm seeing it in my life, and this is not the first time you are seeing it in your life, or you'll be creating shit in your life. Okay, you will do more. So, but let's try to understand why it happened. Let's understand the root causes. Let's go deeper into why, how, and more importantly, let's look towards the future. What did we learn from it, and what are those processes or mechanisms we need to create which will prevent it from happening in the future? So I've seen, being a CIO, I've seen enough system failures, I've seen enough blunders, enough downtimes that happened because of human mistakes and all. And I think every time we have taken the opportunity to go deeper and make our own processes and mechanisms much more resilient, to prevent failure. Because people may fail, but it's your institutional mechanisms that should help. Those are the guardrails that should help people not fail, right? Even when they are taking risks. So that's a very strong one. And I think the other one I want to call out is, the we call that as a safety net between me and my co-founder Mahesh. We call it as a safety net. That means, when you are in an organizational context, in a team context, uh, do people feel safe to share ideas, to share feedback, to talk about unpleasant things, to talk about their concerns, to talk about risks, to talk about things which are not in the, what you call, are not in the political correctness zone. Okay, and I think that's where it's a job of a leader to continuously remind people that, hey, you are in a safety net, you are in a safe zone. You can voice your opinions, you can voice your concerns, you can voice your you can speak your mind here. um, and I think that goes a long way. You make people feel safe, and that goes a long way in helping people to open up. both in terms of giving ideas to you, as well as in in flagging off any potential risks which could kind of be an egg on your face, right? Okay, so there is one article that my team searched out for all of you. It is it is a business.com article about 12 ways to foster entrepreneurial culture. You can probably, so this should help you. Otherwise, I'm sure if you ask ChatGPT a question, how to foster an entrepreneurial culture, 10 most important things, it should give you some, it should give you some output. I'm damn sure about that. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Hey, thanks for that. This is Simon Sinek. Thanks, Sets. I'm sure it is you. And Kanam, thanks to you as well for suggesting that this is Simon Sinek who has written the book Start with Why. I read the audiobook and it was pretty powerful. So maybe someone, Sumit or Vinay, if you can please put the link to the book on the chat, on the LinkedIn chat, that will be great. Yeah. Okay, so uh, I see a long note there. It must be Karthikeyan. Oh yeah, it's Karthikeyan. Okay, so on the same discussion, Karthikeyan. Hey Karthik, thanks for joining us. He says that as a startup founder for 4 startups in India, Quick Skipper, Snap Learned One, Cerebrus Learn, and Sell Like Hell. Wow, I mean, those are pretty catchy names. I believe that in order to infuse entrepreneurial spirit in one, it must be simultaneously top-down and bottoms-up integration of forces. Oh, those are some really powerful phrases, top-down and bottom-up integration of forces. Top-down because a nation built on the enterprising spirit influenced by its institution. Da 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 da. Yes, yes, yes. And okay, so I think Karthik, there's some sort of incomplete comments that I'm getting here. But of course, Karthik, I mean, very, very important one. And this is not about, you know, driving an entrepreneurial culture within your department, etc. It is more about entrepreneurial culture in the country or in the ecosystem. Top-down mechanisms, yes, there have to be incentives, there have to be institutional mechanisms to foster entrepreneurship, like what the government is doing with the Startup India kind of initiatives, but also bottoms up. Like for example, what our universities are doing, what the IITs are doing. There are incubation centers everywhere. There are incubators being run by companies, and those are the ones like where somebody having a startup idea can pitch and then start off, get some seed capital and start off and then get mentoring and all that. So yes, it works at both levels. When I bring it to the enterprise context, yeah, the institutional mechanisms are like your internal shark tanks, your suggestion schemes, your competitions, idea competitions, and like I was in a large corporate where a lot of these things were happening. But of course, at the same time, grounds up, when let's say somebody wants to participate in these idea competitions or these kind of forums, do you really get the time and approval to do this from your boss or not? I think those are grounds up mechanisms that also need to be put in place. Hey, thanks for your contributions, Sats and Karthik. Okay. Okay. So, Sats, there was one question which my team feels that we didn't answer it too well, or we didn't answer it in the past. So I'm going to ask my team to bring it up, which says, what impact can ChatGPT have in the near future? Of course, all of you guys can contribute. You're invited to contribute here. But then, we sort of try to summarize a lot of stuff that we discussed and summarize it into some sort of an answer for you sets. Um, See, with all our discussions, when we look at these positive, negative impacts, when I was also looking at like what is creating this excitement. Um, I see this continuum that there has always been a lot of data. I think it has started with a lot of structured data being out there, with all your ERPs and CRMs and supply chains and all that in the Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 world. There was a lot of user generated content, and there was an explosion of content, whether it is text or multimedia content and all that, right? But it was still data and maybe some amount of information. I think what is happening now with with AI tools is that all this data and information is being processed, with a certain amount of intelligence, which is giving you insights. Okay, so it's not just a search result that comes to you, but it's like a combination of search results and driving certain automating the insights for you. And the other thing that we see is that it's generative AI, right? So that means you can write new things, you can draw new art, you can create diagrams, etc. etc. So the insights, converting data into information is what happened earlier, then information into intelligence with big data, and now what is coming is driving insights and creative output from all the information that is existing in the world, which is what is making it very powerful, right? So the positive impacts of this, as I said, the driving insights and creative output can be on customer service, on productivity. By the way, my own productivity has gone up significantly because I used to take a lot of notes, which used to be in the bulleted form, and then I used to spend a lot of time, like converting them into either minutes of meetings or email response to a client saying that, hey, this is what we discussed, or writing a wiki for my team, that, hey, this is what we discuss, this is how we go about it going forward in the future. And now what I'm seeing is that um, this insights and creative output is, um, I can feed it my bulleted notes, which are like, words without verbs, words without the proper construction of subject to verb object kind of construction. And when I give it certain intelligent instructions, like for example, convert this uh, into points that can be included in a PowerPoint slide, convert this into minutes of meeting, or convert this into a candidate brief for hiring. Uh, it's able to do that output generation, which is very contextual and which is as per your request. So I'm like playing around with it, and I have stopped doing wordsmithing on any of my either emails or PowerPoints or this thing. I take rough notes, I give it to him, and then it basically does the creative and the language and picking the right words part of it. So this is so I am uh, so this is customer service, enhanced productivity, better access to information. Yes, in the this new information is not just search, but it is much more outcome oriented, much more intuitive, um, better communication. And then I think in any subject you can engage in a conversation where you can learn. So I would say this can really accelerate learning. Of course, there are negative impacts like which we have already discussed: misinformation, biases, threat to privacy, and all of that. But I'm sure there is going to be a era of hybrid intelligence where the human creativity is going to combine with this insights and creative output, which are brought by AI, and that basically makes life simpler for everyone. As customers, we don't have to suffer. As employees, we can get better service, and the level of productivity overall can go up, right? um, so again, what we are also doing from your questions is like, just my team goes back and does some sort of like, research into, hey, can we really point to this, I would say, off the cuff question into, some in, can we provide some insight, etc. So my team goes find some links for you, which we are going to put here. Um, so then let's move on. If there are any guys, please keep asking questions. If any one of you have any, based on whatever we are discussing. Okay, so I do see one question here. Okay, it is from uh, Sets again. Do CXOs keep and maintain a resume? Okay. Mm, I think Sets, two answers to that question. A practical answer is that as long as I was one, till the time someone reached out to me saying that, hey, we want to hire you, can you send a resume? I didn't make one. Okay. For a number of years, I didn't have a resume because I wasn't looking out. But then and I wasn't looking out when I changed my job. But then when someone approached me and gave me a sort of very compelling proposition from a global mobility and from a digital transformation and from a leadership development, etc., points of view, I was forced to make a resume. So now coming the second part of it is, um, yeah. So the first part of it is that yes, if you're looking out, you definitely need to keep a resume, and CXOs do look out sometimes. Uh, Very rare that that they are, unless you are a family man, you would be open to opportunities. The other aspect of it was, something someone told me once long back, and that stuck with me. And they said that, listen, you should be, whatever shape or form you have a resume in, okay, if you don't find something significant to update on it on a quarterly basis, okay, I think you're in the wrong job. You should start looking out. Okay. And that's a very powerful advice for, it's kind of a cross check on your comfort zone. You can be running operations, you can be doing, sort of the same thing over and over again, and everyone is comfortable, your bosses are comfortable, your team is comfortable, everyone is comfortable. But then the discomfort can be created by doing a quarterly checkpoint on a resume and check back with whatever you have done your last 3 months of calendar, or last 3 months of whatever output you have generated, and see, hey, is any of this worth writing in a resume? And if there's nothing that you find worth writing in a resume, either start finding those initiatives, or creating those potential outcomes which you can then write in the resume next quarter. But then if you're not getting some sort of like opportunity from your organization to do any of those things, let's say they can be in a cost cutting mode, they can be in a lights on mode, etc., there can be many things there. But if you don't find something, and you see that you cannot find something, even if you consciously try, it's time to look out. I hope that answers your question, Sats. Okay, so let me just look around again to audience comments. We have someone from Cameroon joining us, Randy Logistics. Hey, this seems to be a company name. I would really love to see the name of the person who's behind this company. Go on and mention your name. Um, okay, so then I have another comment from Karthik saying that, hey, the yardstick with which one should measure employee partner contribution to an entrepreneurial spirit is not the countless workmen hours put in, but the quality of it, or that measure the others in the team feel that employee partner has added value qualitatively, whether tangible or palpably one to the process at work. Yeah, Karthik, I think long answer, but yeah, I mean, what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is about ownership, okay? And ownership is always for outcomes, not for processes. Most of the people, they feel an ownership towards a process or for a KPI of that particular process, right? They don't really stretch out to see themselves having an ownership, which is more like an end to end. I mean, I'll give you a small example. Um, long back when I was in my customer service role, we had a spare parts sort of warehouse come point of sale just below our office. So we had on the ground, on the basement, we had a parking, and we could, like, sort of get the customers, trucks or tempos out there for collecting the material. And then on the ground floor we had our spare parts counter as well as warehouse for small parts. And on the top floor, we had the office. Now, so typically the warehouse is different and the office is different, but there were many instances when the part that the customer buys in an expensive and heavy one, and the people at the ground and ground floor or basement, you don't have sufficient people who could carry that part. And then somebody will sort of call up the top floor, hey, is there anyone who wants to lend a hand? And you could clearly see the difference, that there are some people who are looking out for others, because that handling those parts meant dirtying your hands and then coming back and washing your hands with the soap, because these were mechanical parts. And then you would see there are some people, of course, I would include myself in those people, who would say, oh, it's about the customer. We were a customer service operation, we were a customer facing office. Oh, that's about the customer, so let's rush down and help the customer load goods into their truck or tempo, and then get them going. But then, I think that's what I would put as ownership. Starts with the customers. It is for the outcomes, and that's what you need to really look at, whether people are limiting themselves to what work they are doing, and saying that, hey, that's somebody else's work, or are they really taking ownership of the eventual outcomes, right? Okay. So, okay, let's come to the fun part of our session now. And so, Prashant Dokania had asked in one of the sessions, he's into finance. He said, is there any connection between ChatGPT and astrology, right? So, we asked this question to ChatGPT, and the answer we got from ChatGPT was, there's no direct connection between ChatGPT and technology. It's a machine learning model that uses NLP to generate human-like responses to text input. Astrology, on the other hand, is a belief system based on the idea that the positions and movements of celestial bodies can influence human affairs and natural world events. Okay, and but it does say that it can generate responses to questions on this or discussions about astrology based on the information it has been trained on. However, its responses would be based purely on the language used in those discussions and would not reflect any belief or understanding of astrology itself. Okay, so very, very diplomatic answer by ChatGPT, and let me show you what we found. Okay, so you will have to bear with me for a moment, because the screen will go into a iterative mode, but then I'll quickly switch over to ChatGPT. Okay. Okay. I hope you guys can see my screen. Uh, Sumit, Vinay, if you can't, just ping me over voice, because I can't see our chat now. Okay. Okay. So, so my wife knows quite a bit of astrology. Okay. She doesn't do it commercially, of course, but just to help people. So I keep hearing a lot of mumbo jumbo about astrology, and I do know there's something called a retrograde. That means, like, you see the planets moving in the reverse direction. I mean, they're supposed to move in a certain direction, because what's happening is that the Earth is moving faster in its orbit than these planets, and these planets therefore seem to be moving backwards. It happens sometimes, not always, and it's called a retrograde. I just like simply asked. I don't know what is retrograde, what it does, why it is important. I just know that it has got some different connotations. So I just asked in a very, very layman's language, as per astrology, how do Jupiter and Saturn in retrograde affect the money and family situation of someone? Now, I didn't ask it a theoretical question that can you answer astrology question or how well can you answer astrology question. I just put a situation on it, and it actually gave me a response which I need to actually check with my wife whether whether this is good enough or not. And maybe my team member Sumit, he's a bit of a pandit guy, and he knows a bit of it. So Sumit, maybe you can put on the chat whether this seems common sense or not, whether this seems fair or not. And then I asked it a question which was more physics related, okay? Because astrology is actually based on astronomy, movement of planets, and all. And I asked it a very a simple question: can Mercury go in retrograde in astrology? Now, Mercury actually, runs faster. It has got a faster, you can say, year, than because it has a smaller orbit than Earth. And it says that yes, Mercury is known for its frequent retrograde periods in astrology. And it says what does Mercury do, etc., etc., etc. Right? And then some common advice during Mercury retrograde is so and so, so and so. Well, now let's combine astrology and astronomy together. And so I asked it a very innocent question. I said, but Mercury and Venus move faster than Earth and should not be possible to go into retrograde. And it gives a very intelligent answer. It says, from our perspective on Earth, it appears that the planets Mercury and Venus move faster than Earth, but they still go into retrograde periods due to their orbits around the sun. And it gives me and now this is the astronomical answer. Okay, this is not astronomy answer, not astrology answer. Says Mercury's retrograde period occurs about 3 times a year and lasts for about 3 weeks. During this time, it appears to move backwards in the sky, but this is actually an optical illusion caused by the difference in the speed of its orbit around the sun and Earth's orbit around the sun. And now it says Venus has a longer orbital period than Mercury, but it still goes into retrograde every 18 months for about 40 days. Okay. And yeah, and it says, and then it then goes on to say what does the retrograde period of Mercury and Venus go on doing, right? And then we asked it a question. I asked Sumit to frame a question for ChatGPT, which can be a very, very complex one. Okay. So Sumit gave a scenario that if 4 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus, and Rahu, are in conjunction, what are the potential consequences? And it says, the conjunction of so and so in a much rare and powerful astrological event. The exact consequences of this conjunction are up. Now, see, I never used. Okay, oh, I did use conjunction. So it also used conjunction, right? But some general effects: intense ambition, creativity and passion, strong willpower and determination, challenges and obstacles, etc., etc. Right? And it says, now I said conjunction. I said if 4 planets, but I mentioned 5 planets. Okay, you see this in conjunction. Now it has understood that 4 versus 5, and it says overall the conjunction of these 5 planets can create a unique and complex astrological configuration which can manifest in different ways. Do consult a qualified astrologer to gain a more detailed and personalized understanding. So the so here is the insight part coming from this, which is that don't ask it can you do it or not, or don't assume that does it find astrology taboo or does it find certain subject taboo, etc., etc. You just ask a question that you have. Okay. And what we are sort of getting to understand is that it has been fed a lot of content out there, I think there have been some guardrails in terms of it answering out and out negative areas, like, for example, the benefits of smoking, or, for example, how to hack well. Those are things which are out of scope in this syllabus. But I think there are lots of other stuff out there, which it has been probably trained on, and which it can give you certain answers to. Yeah. What's the insight then? Keep an open mind, ask it intelligent questions, and you will be amazed by its intelligence. Okay. So let me see if there are any other questions. Otherwise, we can close the session. We are about 45 minutes. And okay. So maybe just one more question let's take, which is again about, which is Karthikeyan. You only asked it in one of the sessions, which is ChatGPT compatible with analog technologies, or is it geared towards future technologies such as quantum computing? So, um, so it's see, ChatGPT is a generative AI. That means you feed it a sort of, you feed it as much knowledge as you can. So I let me point out to the first movie of Robo, which was a Rajnikant movie. If you remember, this Rajni the Robo, you give it a book. So there was a scene where there's a book, and it's just like, just opens that book, and it has absorbed all of it, and then it basically, like, has absorbed all the knowledge about, from all the books in the library in a matter of probably minutes. Okay. And then it can answer your question. So it has been fed a lot of knowledge. So it's primarily natural language processing, primarily content, and I think quantum computing, etc., are more capability related stuff. For example, if you put a backend of quantum computing on like, on ChatGPT kind of AI technologies, probably the responses may be faster, probably the kind of connections it makes internally, the quality of output may be much better, but it's fundamentally a natural language processing, and a sort of trained training oriented AI is what I would say. It's got probably nothing to do so much with analog or quantum. And maybe, like, I don't call myself an expert. I'm more of a practitioner who's trying to figure out and stretch its capabilities, who's kind of treating it as a friend, and as, like, as someone who can be befriended, and who can be intelligently befriended, who can be naughty, and who can be, like, who can be fun, um, and that's how I'm looking at it. Okay, but if anybody has a better answer to that, I would love to hear it out. So before we close, there is a question. There's a comment from Sets. It says that interesting that you still had to ask Sumit to validate. ChatGPT has to address some confidence factor in its responses, kind of like Viva response. So Sets, frankly, I had to ask Sumit. I asked Sumit because I myself, I have zero knowledge of astrology, and, like, just like, um, don't laugh at it, but for me, astrology is like what biology was, when I was in my high school. Couldn't understand at all what biology. I was, like, so happy with, like, cracking problems of maths and physics and all of that. Never could understand anything in biology, and with all those kinds of mumbo jumbo complex names, this Zota and that Mium, and I couldn't remember all of that. So astrology is similarly, like, there are like so many permutations, combinations. There's so many planets and so many rashis and all. Very quickly, it goes beyond my intelligence. So I didn't know what it is, and therefore I got Sumit to validate it. But as Sumit has answered in the next comment, it says that the answers by ChatGPT on astrological questions are true, but at the same time they are general statements. So I think that is where we are seeing the limitations of technologies like ChatGPT, is that they are trained on empirical data. There's a lot of data and information out there. It's able to give you insights and creative output, but that's where it lies its limitation, and that's where lies the probably the human still something for humans to still do, which is creativity and 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 mind my words, asking intelligent questions. So Chat GPT can be very dumb if you ask it dumb questions, and Chat GPT can be very intelligent if you ask it intelligent questions, right? So if you I don't know how to show this to you, but let me see if there is a way. I don't see how there can be a way. But let me just narrate this to you, okay? So we have, we have been running some. I mean, this is about Flock and Go, our startup on group experiences, and we've been running some. We are still in a beta mode, so we are not open to consumers yet, even though the app is on the app stores. And some of these beta consumers, we sought their feedback over Zoom because our content partner is somewhere. These guys are in Pune, and then the best way was to just do a Zoom. And then, so there's some nice and powerful interviews, feedback, etc., recorded on Zoom. And these guys were very hesitant to convert that into a video because they said that hey, the quality is not that great and all that. So I just asked them one thing: is the audio quality good? They, yeah, the audio quality is decent. So what's your hesitation? The video quality is not. We say, oh, you know what? I mean, this is a easier problem to solve. So we actually were on a Zoom call. I shared my screen, went to ChatGPT, and I asked it an intelligent question. I said, we have got some powerful customer testimonial videos. However, the video quality is not great. Okay, can you please help me write a funny introduction which can be put up before the videos start? Okay, I called it as I think a humorous introduction which can, and then it actually wrote a very humorous one. It says. Um, we know you are used to very high quality audio video content, but we are a startup and we couldn't afford a Hollywood director. Well, we could only afford Zoom, and um, uh, the quality. Um, we know you have enough resilience to bear with its quality, but we promise you that the content is great. And then so it's like created a 3 paragraphs, and reading it is like delightful. After that, you could even watch the video expecting without really complaining, a video which can have the graininess or the quality or the video quality of a Charlie Chaplin era movie, and then you will naturally focus on the audio and not so much on the video. So, and they were delighted, and they're like, Jagdish, you solved our problem. I said, no, we just experimented. So I think before before I kind of drop off, I want to leave you with this thought. Um, it's all about experimentation. It's all about not judging, whether something can be done or cannot be done. You say, hey, let me try. Let me try if it can do this. But then you be clear about what output you want. So, what kind of output am I looking from this? Am I looking at a fun output? Am I looking at a bulleted output? Am I looking at a paragraph output? Am I creating a minutes of meeting? And then be very clear about expectations. So it's like it's like a good secretary, but a good secretary needs very, very clear instructions, right? Yeah. So, on the same discussion, I have one comment from Sats. It says, He says it's interesting that one generative AI is like children growing up, parallel to how humans learn. Uh, Wrote, memorize, and apply. The event horizon would be when it applies to knowledge on its own. Oh yes, of course, sets, but there is one major difference. Okay, between humans learning and AI learning. When humans learn, the weight and size of our brain is limited. Okay, uh, think about is the size of the brain and is the computing capacity in terms of, let's say, petabytes, or let's say, tbps, in whatever way you want to capture it, in terms of either storage or in terms of teraflops, or in terms of whatever metric you want to put out there. There is a limitation to the human mind, but isn't one to AI, and that is what makes it interesting. That, and now let's say millions of people using ChatGPT. Every time they're interacting with ChatGPT, it is learning millions of things in a day. It's getting millions of feedback, good, bad, ugly, in a day. Um, People are uploading a ton of things there, which probably may not be in the public domain, and it's learning. It's learning. So, I mean, this is like learning at a super massive scale, which as humans we can't imagine. And that's what, in my view, brings the event horizon much closer, mind you, much closer than what anybody may think. By the way, there are a couple of articles on artificial superintelligence. You can check these out. You can just Google for artificial superintelligence, and you will find these two articles. These are very long articles, but very, I would say, first principle in their approach, in terms of first starting with what is intelligence, comparing an ant's intelligence to a goat's intelligence, to a human's intelligence, and then extrapolating all of that to artificial super intelligence. And I think it's a mind opener. It's a mind bender as well as a mind opener to read those articles. It blew my mind when I read it like a few years back, at least about 4 years back, 3 or 4 years back. And I have been, since that day, I have been waiting for the event horizon sets. Coming to your question, I've been waiting for the event horizon since that time. And now, at the same time, in the same article, um, I read this survey they took of all the futurists and all these scientists and everybody who's working in the AI, NLP, machine learning domain. That by when they see in which by which year they see artificial intelligence overtaking human intelligence, and then in a way controlling the world, or whatever you may call it. Now, which is the event horizon you are talking about? Um, the the optimistic event horizon was, I think, in about 40 years, which was about 2073 or something like that. And the more pessimistic one was 2043. Okay, but then all of them agreed that the way things are advancing, the way money is being poured into the startup ecosystem, the innovations, and the kind of research that is happening, and the way it is all coming together with internet, with everyone being connected and everyone having access to everyone else's research, they said, this is definitely going to be much faster than even 2043, and all of them agreed. Okay, I see with what ChatGPT is doing, and it's not about what kind of output it is giving to you and me. It is about what is the input we are giving to it, and how fast it is learning from millions of us. That is what brings event horizon much closer. I don't know how many of you got the essence of this particular discussion. I definitely know that Sats got it. So Sats, yeah, we should connect on this more often. Absolutely, you got it, Vinash Kali Prithupati. All of us are doing it right now, me included. Okay, so we are like dot on the hour. Oh my God, I wanted to finish it in 45 minutes, and then Sats trapped me into a discussion on ChatGPT and generative AI. And here we are at the end of the hour. So let me quickly summarize it before we leave. So what we covered was, we talked about the SVB failure and how it affects our startup ecosystem. Um, uh, yeah, there was a question about why should the government bail it out, and we said it's more complex. You have to look at the larger good, quote unquote. Okay. Then we talked about how to instill entrepreneurial spirit in members of our teams. Yeah, the whole thing is about changing from command and control to risk taking, leading by example. A very important resource being the book Start with Why by Simon Sinek. Tolerance to failure, um, and a very simple introspection that, whenever things mess up, what is your reaction as the leader? Do you go into a process improvement and into a soul searching mode, or do you start a CYA action, or do you start CYA actions? I think those are some things to kind of check about. There's a definitely a link to an article that my team is putting out there. Then we talked about, do CXOs keep a resume? And I think we went beyond resume to say that, hey, every quarter just check if you have something to add to your resume or not, if you have an opportunity to add something to a resume or not, and if not, start looking out, where can you add value to your resume. Yeah, and then um, we had some fun bit about ChatGPT and astrology, about Prashant's question. Um, while the first question was like, a simple question, is there a connection between ChatGPT and astrology, and a very diplomatic and non-value adding answer. But then we went directly jumped into ChatGPT and started asking it some, very innocent and mundane questions about, hey, what happens when this planet and this planet and all that. And then it started becoming intelligent. It lost its diplomacy and got into a knowledge dispensing mode, and that was really fun. Some of it was validated by Sumit to be valid. He knows a bit of astrology himself. Yeah, and then we talked about the event horizon. How what's the big difference between how humans learn and how systems like ChatGPT learn. They learn at scale and without limitations, whereas human beings have the limitation of this particular sphere or spherical something, right? Which also has a lot of nonsense going around beyond intelligence, by the way. So yeah, and we discussed about artificial superintelligence, the event horizon, and the event horizon with advent of ChatGPT and how we are training it in terms of how we feel, what we like, what we don't like, what kind of questions we have, what kind of answers we like to have from it. The event horizon is much much closer. So I definitely know there weren't too many attendees today, but I loved the discussion, and I'm sure, like always, a lot of you would be watching this session, the recorded version of that session. So thank you everyone, including Karthik and and our friend from Cameroon, and Sats, especially Sats, getting up at 5:30 in the morning to attend this session, and then engage, as always, engaging in some really bright questions. Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks' time. Um, yeah, I should be. It's March actually, and March is generally a quarter end, year end for many of us. So I'm again a little pessimistic about being able to put together a guest session. But let us see if we can find a much better topic to engage on. And if I can find, a CIO from an MNC for whom the March ending is not like my Indian counterparts. So thank you everyone. Without further ado, I'll leave the rest of the weekend for you and for myself. It was really fun, answering your questions, doing some background research, chatting with ChatGPT about astrology, and I hope you share the fun. Have a great weekend. Smile, experiment with, whatever is available to us as tools, and have a great weekend. Thank you so much, and thank you all who are watching the recording as well. See you. Bye bye. Have a great weekend.